Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UE Sanctuary and watched the broken medical ship float in the darkness of space. The ship looked like a wounded bird, with its engines dead and its hull cracked in 3 places. Red emergency lights blinked slowly along its sides, telling everyone who could see that this was a hospital ship carrying wounded people who needed help. A medical frigate had been trying to reach the mining colony on Kepler 442b when everything went wrong. Their engines failed during what should have been a simple supply run. Now over 200 injured colonists were trapped inside, with no way to move and no way to get the medical care they desperately needed. Morrison had been in space for 15 years and had seen many bad situations, but this one made his stomach tight with worry. The colonists had been hurt in a mining accident 3 days ago. Some had broken bones, others had burns from chemical spills, and a few were barely alive with internal injuries that only the best doctors could fix. Lieutenant Amy Walsh sat at the tactical station and watched her screens with growing concern. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she tried to understand what she was seeing. The sensors were picking up something that made her heart beat faster. "Sir, we have multiple contacts on long-range sensors," she said, her voice steady, but with a hint of fear underneath. "It looks like a Zephyrian hunting pack. 6 vessels moving toward us at high speed." Morrison turned to look at her. The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy as aggressive fighters who took what they wanted and destroyed what they could not use. They had been fighting with human colonies for years over mining rights and territory, but they had never attacked medical ships before. There were laws that protected hospital ships and medical transports. Every species in the galaxy had agreed to these laws. "Open a channel to them," Morrison ordered. "Tell them that the sanctuary is clearly marked as a medical vessel under interstellar law. Remind them that attacking hospital ships is against every treaty and agreement we have." The communication officer worked quickly to send the message. Within minutes, the response came back on the main screen. The Zephyrian war leader appeared, his face showing the ridge patterns that marked him as a high-ranking military commander. His name was Vextar, and Morrison had heard of him before. He was known for being cruel and caring nothing for the lives of others. Vextar's voice came through the speakers with cold hatred. "Human mercy is weakness. Your wounded are resources. That should be eliminated, not saved. They consume food and medical supplies that could be used for stronger beings." Morrison felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "War leader Vextar, these are civilians. Men, women, and children who were hurt in an accident. They are not soldiers. They pose no threat to you or your people." Vextar's face twisted into what humans had learned to recognize as contempt. "All humans are threats. Your species spreads across the galaxy like a disease, taking planets that should belong to stronger races. Today, we begin to cure this disease." Before Morrison could respond, the Zephyrian ships opened fire. A first wave of energy blasts struck the medical frigate directly. The ship's hull cracked open like an egg, and Morrison watched in horror. As the medical bay was exposed to the vacuum of space, about 237 people died in that first attack. Men, women, and children who had trusted that the red crosses on their ship would protect them. Among them was Dr. Lisa Carter, a children's doctor who had volunteered for the mission because she wanted to help the injured colonists. Nurse Kevin Thompson died trying to shield 3 wounded children from the blast that tore through the medical bay. The sanctuary's defensive systems came online automatically, but Morrison knew they were in trouble. 6 Zephyrian ships against 1 human vessel meant they were outnumbered and outgunned. The sanctuary was built for rescue missions, not combat. "All hands to battle stations," Morrison commanded. "Raise shields and prepare to defend the medical frigate." But it was too late for the people on the medical ship. The Zephyrians were not just attacking the vessel. They were hunting down every escape pod and life raft that tried to get away. Morrison watched his screens in growing horror as the alien ship systematically destroyed every small craft that carried wounded survivors. "They're not taking prisoners," Walsh said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're killing everyone who tries to escape." Morrison had seen war before, but this was different. This was murder. The Zephyrians were not just attacking military targets. They were deliberately killing wounded civilians who could not fight back. They were showing the galaxy that they believed human compassion was something to be destroyed. The sanctuary shook as Zephyrian weapons struck their shields. Morrison knew they could not win this fight. His ship was built to save lives, not to fight battles against 6 enemy vessels. But he had to try to save whoever he could. "Launch all rescue pods," he ordered. "Get to any survivors from the medical frigate." The crew worked frantically to save lives while the ship's weapons fired back at the Zephyrian fleet. They managed to rescue 43 survivors from the wreckage of the medical frigate, but it was not enough. Too many had died, and more were dying as the Zephyrians continued their attack. "Sir, we cannot hold them much longer," the tactical officer reported. "Our shields are failing." Morrison made the hardest decision of his life. All rescue pods back to the ship. Prepare to jump to hyperspace. "But sir, there might be more survivors." "If we stay, we all die, and no one will know what happened here," Morrison said firmly. "We have to survive to tell Earth what the Zephyrians did." The sanctuary's engines powered up and the ship disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind the wreckage of the medical frigate and the bodies of 237 innocent people. Morrison stood on his bridge and watched the stars blur past, his hands shaking with rage and grief. "Record everything," he told his crew. "Every detail, every image, every piece of evidence. Earth needs to see this. The galaxy needs to know what they did to our wounded." The journey back to Earth would take 3 days. 3 days to prepare a report that would change everything. 3 days to decide how humanity would respond to an attack on those who could not defend themselves. The Zephyrians had made a terrible mistake. They had shown the galaxy that they believed human mercy was weakness. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Admiral Susan Hayes sat in the emergency meeting room of the United Earth Defense Council and watched the holographic display show the destruction of the medical frigate. The images were clear and terrible. She had seen many battles in her 30 years of military service, but nothing like this. This was not war. This was murder. The recording from the sanctuary played over and over again. Each time it showed the same horrible truth. The Zephyrians had deliberately targeted a hospital, ship filled with wounded civilians. They had hunted down every escape pod and life raft, making sure that no one could survive to tell what had happened. They did not just attack a hospital ship. Admiral Hayes said to the 12 council members who sat around the large table. They hunted down the survivors like animals. Every escape pod, every life raft, every person who tried to get away. They wanted to make sure no one could bear witness to what they had done. Council Chairman Paul Rivera was a calm man who had led Earth's government for 8 years. He had seen humanity through 3 wars and countless diplomatic crises. But now his face was hard with anger that he could barely control. How many people died? He asked, though he already knew the answer. 237 aboard. The medical frigate, Admiral Hayes replied. Another 43 from the sanctuary when Captain Morrison tried to help. All of them were non-combatants. All of them were under the protection of interstellar medical laws. The room fell silent. For 300 years, humanity had followed the rules of civilized warfare. They had shown mercy to defeated enemies, protected wounded soldiers, and honored the agreements that separated civilization from barbarism. They had believed that all intelligent species would do the same. Dr. Amanda Foster, the Council's chief medical officer, spoke up from her seat at the far end of the table. Admiral, I want to understand something. The Zephyrians knew this was a medical ship. They could see the red crosses on the hull. They received our transmissions identifying it as a hospital vessel, and they attacked anyway. Yes, Admiral Howe said. They attacked because it was a medical ship. Vexstar told Captain Morrison that human mercy was weakness. He said our wounded were resources that should be eliminated, not saved. Chairman Rivera stood up and walked to the large window that looked out over the city of New Geneva. Earth's capital was peaceful and beautiful, with gardens and parks where children played without fear. But that peace had been bought with the blood of good people who believed in protecting the innocent. The Zephyrians have made their position clear, he said without turning around. They consider our compassion something to be exploited. They target our medical vessels because they believe we will not fight back when they harm the wounded. They are about to learn how wrong they are, Admiral Haas said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with cold fury. Sir, I am asking for authorization to mobilize the Deep Strike Fleet. We need to show them what happens when humanity stops being merciful. The Deep Strike Fleet was humanity's most powerful military force. It had been built to defend Earth from any threat, but it had never been used for offensive operations. The ships were kept in orbit around Earth, ready to protect the home world from invasion. Admiral, said Councilman Robert Kim, who had always been a voice for peaceful solutions, are we really going to start a war over this? The Zephyrians have superior numbers. Their fleet is 3 times the size of ours. This is not about starting a war, Admiral Haas replied. This is about ending the idea that attacking medical ships is acceptable. If we do nothing, every species in the galaxy will think they can target our wounded without consequences. Dr. Foster raised her hand. Sir, if we are going to do this, I want to volunteer for the Medical Corps assignment. Those people died trying to save lives. We owe them more than just revenge. This is not revenge, Doctor, Admiral Haas said. This is justice. And yes, you will have all the medical support you need. We are not going to become like them. We will save every life we can, even enemy lives. Chairman Rivera turned back to face the council. Admiral, explain to me exactly what you are proposing. I am proposing that we send a fleet so large and so powerful that no species will ever again consider targeting our medical vessels. We will not just defeat the Zephyrians, we will make it clear to the entire galaxy that attacking human medical ships means facing the full might of the human fleet. How many ships? Asked Councilwoman Mary Chun. 400 combat vessels, plus twice that many support ships. Medical ships, hospital ships, supply vessels, and mobile repair stations. We will show the galaxy that we can wage war and save lives at the same time. The council members looked at each other. This would be the largest military operation in human history. It would cost billions of credits and take months to organize. But the alternative was to let the Zephyrians get away with murder. The medical ships will be protected, Admiral Hayes continued. Every hospital ship will have destroyer escorts. Every medical frigate will have fighter squadrons. We will make it clear that attacking our wounded means facing our warriors. Chairman Rivera sat back down and looked at each council member in turn. All in favor of authorizing Operation Medical Shield? 12 hands went up. The vote was unanimous. Admiral Hayes, you have full authorization to mobilize the Deep Strike Fleet. You have unlimited resources and complete authority to conduct this operation as you see fit. Thank you, sir. I will not let you down. As the council members left the room, Dr. Foster approached Admiral Hayes. Admiral, I have a request. I want to be on the lead medical ship. I want to be there when we show the galaxy what human medicine can do. Dr. Foster, this is going to be dangerous. The Zephyrians will target our medical vessels. That is exactly why I need to be there. Those people died because they were trying to help others. I am not going to hide on Earth while our medical personnel risk their lives. Admiral Hayes smiled for the first time since receiving the report from the sanctuary. Doctor, you are exactly the kind of person we need for this mission. You will have command of the medical operations. Within hours, orders were being sent to every military base in the solar system. The shipyards of Luna began working around the clock to prepare the largest fleet in human history. Scientists and engineers worked to upgrade weapon systems and medical facilities. Doctors and nurses volunteered by the thousands to serve on the medical ships. But most importantly, the word was spreading throughout the galaxy. Humanity was preparing for war, but not the kind of war anyone expected. This would be a war fought to protect the wounded, not to conquer territory. A war fought to save lives, not to take them. The Zephyrians had wanted to test human resolve by targeting the wounded. They had gotten their answer. An Armada of Retribution was coming, and it would show the galaxy that human mercy was not weakness. It was strength backed by the most powerful military force ever assembled. The wounded would never be targeted again. Earth was going to make sure of that. The shipyards of Luna had never seen activity like this before. Captain Nick Powell stood at the observation deck of the orbital station and watched as the largest fleet in human history took shape in the space around Earth's moon. Dreadnoughts, aircraft carriers, destroyers, and cruisers filled the void as far as the eye could see. Over 400 vessels of war, all bearing the blue and white emblem of the United Earth Defense Force. Powell had been chosen to command the HFY Retribution, one of the new heavy cruisers that had been built specifically for this mission. The ship was armed with the most advanced weapons humanity had ever created, but it also carried something more important, the largest medical bay ever installed on a combat vessel. The Zephyrians wanted to test human resolve, Powell said to his executive officer, Commander Rachel White. They are about to get their answer in a way they never expected. White nodded as she watched the construction teams work on their ship. Sir, I have never seen anything like this. The amount of resources being put into this operation is incredible. She was right. The fleet was not just about firepower, though. There was plenty of that. For every warship, there were 2 support vessels. Medical ships with trauma centers that could handle thousands of wounded patients. Hospital ships with surgical suites more advanced than anything found on most planets. Even the combat vessels had been retrofitted with expanded medical facilities. Sir, incoming transmission from Earth Command, reported Communications Officer Tony Martinez. Admiral Hayes is ready to address the entire fleet. Powell walked to the command center where hundreds of officers and crew members had gathered. Throughout the fleet, 2 million people prepared to hear from their commander. The Admiral's image appeared on screens in every ship, her face showing the determination that had made her one of the most respected leaders in the Earth Defense Force. 3 days ago, the Zephyrians committed an atrocity that will not stand unanswered, Admiral Hayes began. They targeted our wounded. They murdered our medical personnel. They showed the galaxy that they believe human compassion is weakness. Powell felt the collective anger of the fleet, but he also sensed something else. There was a purpose here that went beyond revenge. This was about showing the galaxy what humanity really stood for. Today, we show them and every other species, watching that human compassion is not weakness, it is strength. The Admiral continued. We fight not for conquest, but for the principle that the wounded deserve protection. We fight so that no medical vessel will ever again be targeted by those who mistake mercy for cowardice. In the medical bay of the HFY Retribution, Dr. Amanda Foster worked alongside her staff to prepare for the casualties that would come. The medical facilities on the ship were better equipped than most planetary hospitals. They had trauma surgeons, emergency specialists, and the most advanced medical equipment available. "We are going to save every life we can," Dr. Foster told her team of doctors and nurses. "That is what separates us from the Zephyrians. They destroy life, we preserve it." Chief Medical Officer Carl Bennett, who had volunteered for the mission, despite being near retirement, nodded grimly. "The Zephyrians think that targeting our wounded shows strength. They are about to learn that protecting the wounded is what true strength looks like." Throughout the fleet, similar scenes were playing out. Combat engineers worked to install additional medical equipment on destroyers and frigates. Fighter pilots practiced new tactics designed to protect medical vessels. Marine units trained for boarding operations that would capture enemy ships while keeping their crews alive for medical treatment. The preparation was not just military. Scientists had developed new medical technologies specifically for this mission. Portable surgical units that could be deployed on any ship. Emergency medical pods that could keep wounded patients alive during combat. Advanced life support systems that could treat dozens of different alien species. "Sir," Commander White said as she reviewed the final fleet roster, "I am looking at something I have never seen before. We have more medical personnel than combat. Troops, more doctors than Marines." Powell smiled. "That is the point, Commander. We are not going to conquer the Zephyrians. We are going to show them what happens when you attack those who cannot defend themselves." The fleet included ships from every branch of the Earth Defense Force. The heavy cruisers like the Retribution would provide the main combat power. Destroyers and frigates would protect the medical vessels. The carriers would launch fighter squadrons to secure space around any battle. But the most important ships were the hospital vessels. The UES Mercy was the largest medical ship ever built. It could treat 10,000 patients at once and had surgical facilities that rivaled the best hospitals on Earth. The UES Compassion was designed as a mobile trauma center, capable of reaching wounded personnel anywhere in a battle zone. The UES Healing carried the most advanced medical research laboratories in the galaxy. "Fleet status report," Powell requested. "All combat vessels are ready for departure," reported his tactical officer. "All medical ships are fully staffed and equipped. All support vessels are loaded and standing by." "What about the Zephyrian response?" "Intelligence reports that they are mobilizing their home fleet. They appear to be preparing for a conventional battle." Powell shook his head. "They still do not understand. This is not going to be a conventional battle. We are not coming to trade shots with them in space. We are coming to show them that their way of thinking is wrong." The final briefing was held in the main conference room of the fleet flagship, UES Judgment. Admiral Hayes stood before the assembled captains and commanders, her expression serious but confident. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to embark on the most important mission in human history. Not because we are going to win a great battle, but because we are going to establish a principle that will protect the wounded for generations to come." Captain Morrison of the Sanctuary, who had been promoted and given command of the new UE, Sanctuary 2, raised his hand. "Admiral, what are our rules of engagement?" "Our primary objective is to demonstrate that attacking medical vessels will result in overwhelming consequences. We will use maximum force against military targets, but we will provide medical aid to any wounded, including enemy personnel. We will show the galaxy that we can be merciless in combat and compassionate in victory." Dr. Foster spoke from her position at the medical officers' table. "Admiral, we have prepared for massive casualties on both sides. Our medical ships are ready to treat human and Zephyrian wounded alike. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. Doctor, the Zephyrians believe that showing mercy to the wounded is weakness. We are going to prove that it is the greatest strength a civilization can possess. The fleet prepared to depart. 400 combat vessels, 800 support, ships, and 2 million personnel. The largest military force ever assembled by any species in the galaxy. But more than that, it was a statement about what humanity believed in Dot as the ships formed up for the jump to hyperspace. Powell stood on his bridge and looked out at the Armada. Commander White signaled the fleet. All ships prepare for jump. Aye. Sir, all ships report ready. Then let us go show the galaxy what happens when you target the wounded. The fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving Earth behind. They were heading toward the Zephyrian home system, carrying with them the hopes and anger of all humanity. The Zephyrians had made the mistake of believing that human compassion was weakness. They were about to learn that it was strength-backed. By the most powerful military force ever assembled, the wounded would never be targeted again. The Armada was going to make sure of that. The Battle of Zephyr Prime would be remembered as the day humanity's patience finally ended. The Zephyrian home fleet moved to intercept the human Armada at the edge of their star system, confident in their superior numbers and their belief that humans were too soft to fight a real war. They had 60 ships against the human force, and they expected the same careful defensive tactics they had always seen from human forces. Instead, they faced something they had never encountered before. Controlled Fury. Captain Nick Powell stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution as the fleet dropped out of hyperspace. The sight that greeted them was exactly what intelligence had predicted. The Zephyrian home fleet was arranged in a classic battle formation, with their largest ships in the center and their smaller vessels forming a protective screen around them. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship, reported Communications Officer Tony Martinez. They are demanding that we leave their system immediately. Put them on screen, Powell ordered. War Leader Vexstar appeared on the main display, his ridged features twisted with the same contempt he had shown when he ordered the attack on the medical frigate. Human cowards, you have made a mistake coming. Here, our fleet will destroy you as easily as we destroyed your pathetic medical ship. Powell's voice was calm, but his eyes burned with cold anger. War Leader Vexstar, you are wanted for war crimes against non-combatant personnel. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to interstellar law. Vexstar laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. You speak of law? You speak of surrender? We are the Zephyrian Empire. We take what we want and destroy what we cannot use. Your wounded were weak, so we eliminated them. Then you have chosen your fate, Powell replied. All ships implement Battle Plan Alpha. Show them what happens when you murder the innocent. The human fleet moved forward in perfect formation. The heavy cruisers formed the spearhead, their weapons charging for the first salvo. The destroyers and frigates spread out to protect the medical vessels that followed behind. The carriers launched their fighter squadrons, filling space with small, fast ships that could strike anywhere on the battlefield. But this was not the cautious advance the Zephyrians expected. The human ships moved with deadly purpose. Their weapon systems synchronized for maximum effect. The opening salvo was devastating, precise, overwhelming, and absolutely merciless toward military targets. All medical facilities on Zephyr Prime are to be left untouched. Admiral Hayes commanded from the fleet flagship UE's Judgment. Any Zephyrian vessel that surrenders will be taken prisoner and given medical treatment. We are not them. The first wave of human fire struck the Zephyrian fleet like a hammer. Energy beams and missile volleys tore through their ships with ruthless efficiency. The aliens had built their fleet for raiding weak colonies and intimidating merchant vessels. They were not prepared for the concentrated firepower of the human war machine. Sir, 3 Zephyrian vessels have been destroyed, reported the tactical officer. 2 more are heavily damaged and drifting. Powell watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. The human fleet was performing exactly as planned. Each ship knew its role and executed it perfectly. The combat vessels engaged the enemy fleet, while the medical ships positioned themselves to rescue survivors. "Sir, we are receiving distress calls from the damaged Zephyrian ships," Martinez reported. "They have wounded aboard." "Launch rescue." "Shuttles," Powell ordered without hesitation. "All wounded personnel are to be brought to our medical ships for treatment." Commander Rachel White looked at him with surprise. "Sir, these are the same beings who murdered our medical personnel." "Yes, they are, and that is exactly why we are going to save them. We are going to show the galaxy that we are better than they are." The battle continued for 2 hours. The Zephyrian fleet, built for hit-and-run attacks against defenseless targets, crumbled before the disciplined assault of the human armada. Their ships were faster than the human vessels, but they could not escape the coordinated attack that came from all directions at once. "Sir, the Zephyrian flagship is trying to break away," reported the tactical officer. "They are heading for the outer system." "Intercept them," Powell ordered. "Do not let Vextar escape." The UES Retribution and 3 other heavy cruisers moved to cut off the Zephyrian flagship. The alien vessel was heavily armed and well armored, but it was alone against 4 of humanity's most powerful warships. "Sir, we are being hailed by the Zephyrian flagship," Martinez reported. "Put them through." Vextar appeared on the screen again, but his arrogance was gone. His ship was damaged, his fleet was destroyed, and his face showed the desperate fear of a being who had finally realized he was going to lose. "We surrender," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We invoke the protection of interstellar law." Powell leaned forward in his command chair. "The same law you ignored when you murdered our wounded? The same protection you denied to doctors and nurses who are trying to save lives?" We were following military doctrine," Vextar stammered. "The wounded consume resources that could be used for military purposes. It is more efficient to eliminate them." "Medical officer to the bridge," Powell interrupted. "Prepare to receive prisoners. They will be treated according to interstellar law, because that is what civilized beings do." Dr. Amanda Foster's voice came over the comm system. "Captain, we are ready to receive wounded from all vessels. Our medical bays are prepared to treat both human and Zephyrian casualties." The battle was over. The Zephyrian home fleet had been destroyed or captured. Their planetary defense systems had been neutralized. Their military bases had been occupied by human marines. But most importantly, their way of thinking had been challenged. "Sir, we are receiving surrender offers from 17 Zephyrian vessels," the communications officer reported. "They are requesting medical aid for their wounded." "Grant all requests," Powell ordered. "All wounded personnel are to be treated regardless of species. Launch all medical shuttles and deploy emergency medical teams to every damaged vessel." The aftermath of the battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human medical ships moved among the wreckage of the Zephyrian fleet, rescuing survivors and treating wounded. Doctors and nurses who had volunteered for the mission worked alongside their military counterparts to save lives. Dr. Foster found herself treating a wounded Zephyrian soldier who had been badly injured when his ship was hit. The alien looked at her with confusion and fear. "Why are you helping me?" he asked in broken English. "We killed your people." "Because you are wounded," Dr. Foster replied simply. "That is all that matters right now." The soldier stared at her for a long moment, then closed his eyes. "I do not understand your species." "Maybe that is the problem," Dr. Foster said as she worked to save his life. "Maybe it is time your people learned to understand us." Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Judgment and watched as her medical ships worked to save the lives of both human and Zephyrian personnel. The battle had been won, But the real victory was happening in the medical bays throughout the fleet. "Admiral," Captain Morrison reported from the Sanctuary 2, "we have treated over 300 wounded Zephyrians. They are asking questions about why we are helping them." "What are you telling them?" "The truth. That we believe all wounded deserve care, regardless of what species they are or what they have done." Hayes smiled. "That is the message I want sent to every species in the galaxy. We will fight with overwhelming force when necessary, but we will always show mercy to the wounded." The Battle of Zephyr Prime was over. The Zephyrian Empire was defeated. But more importantly, the galaxy had learned something new about humanity. They had seen that human compassion was not weakness. It was strength backed by the most powerful military force ever assembled. The wounded would never be targeted again. The Armada had made sure of that. 6 months after the Battle of Zephyr Prime, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Zephyrian Empire no longer existed as a military power. Their surviving population had been relocated to worlds where they could rebuild their civilization under human supervision. But the real change was in how every species in the galaxy viewed humanity. Ambassador Helen Ward stood before the Galactic Council in the Great Assembly Hall on Centauri Prime. The massive chamber held representatives from over 200 species, and all of them were watching her with a mixture of respect and fear. She represented not just Earth, but a new coalition of species that had joined the Terran Medical Protection Alliance. The Altarians had been the first to join, followed by the Centauri Republic. Even the Vegan Confederation, who had remained neutral in every conflict for 3 centuries, had signed the new Medical Protection Accords. 47 species had pledged to protect medical vessels and provide aid to the wounded, regardless of which side they were on in any conflict. The Zephyrians believed that targeting the wounded was a viable military strategy, Ward said to the assembled delegates. They thought that human compassion was weakness. The armada that destroyed their fleet proved them wrong. The Corvin delegate, whose reptilian species had been at odds with humanity for decades, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Ambassador Ward, the human response was disproportionate. 400 combat ships to punish one attack on a medical vessel. Many species view this as an overreaction. Ward looked directly at the Corvin as she responded. Delegate SSTAK, it was not disproportionate. It was definitive. We did not just want to stop one attack. We wanted to ensure that no species would ever again consider targeting medical vessels as a valid tactic. Behind her, the holographic display showed the new reality throughout the galaxy. Human medical ships now traveled under the protection of the most advanced escort fleets ever assembled. Hospital ships that had once been easy targets for raiders now moved with destroyer escorts and fighter squadrons. The Red Cross symbol had become the most protected emblem in known space. The results speak for themselves, Ward continued. In the 6 months since the Battle of Zephyr Prime, there have been 0 attacks on medical vessels anywhere in the galaxy. Not one. Medical ships can now travel to war zones and disaster areas without fear of being targeted. Dr. Amanda Foster, now Director of Interstellar Medical Services, stepped forward to address the Council. She had been promoted after her service during the Zephyrian campaign, and she had used her new position to revolutionize medical care throughout human space. The Zephyrians learned something important about humanity during our campaign, Dr. Foster said. We will show mercy to any wounded being, regardless of species or allegiance. We will protect medical personnel, even at the cost of our own lives. But we will also ensure that those who target the wounded face consequences, so severe that no one will ever make that mistake again. The council chamber was silent as the implications of her words sank in. Humanity had not just won a war. They had redefined the rules of engagement for the entire galaxy. The old ways of thinking about conflict and warfare had been replaced by something new. Delegate Setak spoke again, his voice showing the concern that many species felt about human power. Dr. Foster, what assurance do we have that humanity will not use this military force for conquest? Your fleet is larger than any other species possesses. Admiral Susan Hayes, now Supreme Commander of the Medical Protection Fleet, answered from her position at the human delegation table. Delegate Setak, our actions speak louder than our words. We destroyed the Zephyrian military, but we did not conquer their worlds. We relocated their population to safer planets and provided them with the resources they needed to rebuild their civilization. She was right. The aftermath of the Zephyrian campaign had surprised everyone. Instead of occupying Zephyrian worlds, humanity had helped the surviving population find new homes. Instead of enslaving the defeated enemy, they had provided medical care and education to help them understand why their military doctrine had been wrong. Let this be understood by every species in the galaxy. Admiral Hayes continued. Human medical vessels are not targets of opportunity. They are sanctuaries, protected by the full might of the human fleet. Attack them, and you will face not just our weapons, but our absolute resolve. The Andromedan delegate, whose species had recently experienced a devastating plague, stood to speak. Admiral Hayes, Dr. Foster, on behalf of my people, I want to thank humanity for the medical aid you provided during our crisis. Your hospital ships saved millions of lives, and your escort vessels ensured that no one could interfere with the medical mission. Dr. Foster nodded. Delegate Zareth, that is exactly why we created the Medical Protection Alliance. Your people were suffering, and we had the ability to help. The fact that your worlds were in a war zone did not matter. Medical aid should never be dependent on politics. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent message that appeared on the main display. Captain Jake Morrison, now Admiral Morrison and commander of the 2nd Medical Fleet, was reporting from the Rigel system, where a mining disaster had trapped thousands of workers underground. Council members, we are responding to a massive emergency. On Rigel 7, Morrison said from the bridge of the UES Sanctuary 3, a mining complex has collapsed, and we have reports of over 5,000 trapped workers from multiple species. The local government has requested immediate medical assistance. Admiral Morrison, what is your status? Admiral Hayes asked. We have deployed our full medical response team. 12 hospital ships, 36 medical frigates, and a complete escort fleet. We are also coordinating with medical vessels from the Altarian Republic and the Centauri Confederation. Estimated time to begin rescue operations is 4 hours. Ward smiled as she turned back to the Council. This is what the Medical Protection Alliance has accomplished. When disaster strikes, medical ships from multiple species can respond together without fear of attack. The escort fleet ensures that no one will interfere with the rescue mission. The Rigel response was exactly the kind of operation that the new doctrine had made possible. In the past, medical ships responding to emergencies in contested space had often been attacked by raiders or military forces who saw them as easy targets. Now, any attack on a medical vessel meant facing the combined fleets of the Alliance. The numbers tell the story, Dr. Foster said as she activated another display. Medical response times have improved by 60% since the Alliance was formed. Casualty rates in conflict zones have dropped by 40%. Medical personnel recruitment is at an all-time high because doctors and nurses know they will be protected while doing their jobs. The Corvin delegate looked uncomfortable, but he asked the question that many species were thinking. What about species who do not join the Alliance? Are they still entitled to medical protection? Yes, Ward answered immediately. The right to medical care when wounded is not dependent on political allegiance. Any medical vessel displaying the proper identification will receive protection from Alliance forces, regardless of which species operates it. This had been one of the most controversial decisions in forming the alliance. Some member species had wanted to limit protection to their own medical vessels. But humanity had insisted that the principle of protecting the wounded must apply to everyone. "We learned something important from the Zephyrian campaign," Admiral Hayes explained. "The moment we start deciding which wounded deserve protection and which do not, we become no better than those we fought against. Every wounded being has the right to medical care, and every medical worker has the right to protection while providing that care." The session continued for several more hours as delegates asked questions about the new medical protection protocols. Some species were concerned about the cost of providing escort fleets for medical ships. Others worried about the military implications of having human warships operating throughout the galaxy. But the results spoke for themselves. Medical ships could now operate in the most dangerous regions of space without fear of attack. Refugee camps received regular medical supplies. Planets devastated by natural disasters could count on immediate medical response from multiple species. As the session ended, Ward stood to make a final statement. 6 months ago, the Zephyrians believed that human compassion was weakness. They thought that targeting our wounded would make us afraid to help others. Instead, they created something they never expected, a galaxy where the wounded are protected by the most powerful military alliance in history. The delegates filed out of the chamber, each carrying with them the knowledge that the rules had changed forever. The old ways of warfare, where medical personnel were seen as legitimate targets, were gone. In their place was a new understanding that protecting the wounded was not just morally right, it was strategically necessary. Later that day, Ward stood in her office, looking out at the space traffic around Centauri Prime. Medical ships from dozens of species moved freely through space, their red cross markings clearly visible. Each one was accompanied by escort vessels from the Alliance, a visible reminder that attacking medical personnel was no longer a viable option for anyone.